Okay. Hopefully this works. Everyone can hear me. And I'm glad to see some here. And it looks like we also have a full house virtually. So that's always awesome. So just a little overview. I'm going to go over, let me take a step back. The majority of this presentation is going to focus on the application process. I don't want to exclude our SAHI folks or school counseling folks. I do understand the process of those credentials as well. So I want to cover that quickly, but majority, because of how complicated the licensure process is, that's going to be the primary focus of today. And I'm also just going to talk a little bit about what you need to do even after obtaining licensure, because there are requirements where we are continuous learners and we are required to seek continuing education. So know that just because you complete your master's degree, great, but you still have to continue on and obtain educational, continuing education. Maybe not in the master's realm or higher ed realm, but that is something to know that you will forever be learning. So it's not, I learned and I'm done. It's a continuous learning. Let me make sure. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. So as you all know, right, we do have 4 concentrations within the master's program. There's the addiction concentration, the clinical mental health, school counseling, and student affairs and higher education. Again, we're just primarily going to focus on addiction and clinical mental health because those lead to state licensure. And something to note is I'm specifically speaking of New Jersey state licensure because we are based in New Jersey and I know that process best. So that's the one that we're going to focus on. Unfortunately for SAHI folks, because of the program and what's needed, there's no potential pathway to licensure or credentialing. So if that is the concentration that you're in currently and you're like, oh, but I want to potentially work towards license, talk to your advisor, switch, because unfortunately SAHI is so specific, it's not accredited, it's not K-CREP accredited, and it's missing too many components to even apply for licensure or apply for the advanced cert program. With our school folks, you also do have some options of continuing your education in the advanced counseling certificate program so that you can go on to meet the state requirements that are needed for licensure, specifically for LPC, LAC or LPC, and I'll get into those acronyms if you don't know them already. So again, if you're in the addiction and clinical mental health, you are definitely going for license, like no question about it. SAHI, unfortunately, talk to your advisor if you want this. And school, you have an option after completing your master's. Okay, and maybe this is a shameless plug, but I oversee the 4 cert programs, and so I have to also include them in this presentation. But we do also offer 4 cert programs, the advanced counseling cert program, and that's specifically for folks that need the additional credit. So those, my school folks, that's the program that you might want to look into, especially if you want to go on for licensure. We also have the certified drug and alcohol counselor program, but it's alcohol and drug counselor. I messed that up. And that is to become certified as a substance use counselor. So that might be for folks that might get their master's in clinical mental health, but eventually want to add in substance use counseling in their scope of practice. Also, school counselors, you can add that in as well. We also have the school counseling certification program. So any addiction or clinical mental health folks, you're like, hey, I want to add in a school counseling credential. We offer that as well. So you can come back and complete the requirements. And then the student assistant coordinator program, that program is for folks that want to work in a K through 12 setting as maybe more of a community liaison who works within the school counseling department, but also within the helps connect community and really focuses on mental health, behavioral, and substance use concerns in the K through 12 districts. So if you guys want more information, I think my contact information is at the end of this presentation. Feel free to reach out, but you do have some other options after your master's should you want to pursue something else. Okay. All right, so quickly just touching upon school counseling, folks. At the end of your program, what you're gonna do is you will file for graduation. I mean, everyone should file for graduation at the end of their program. However, with school, what this does is it triggers our registrar's office to audit your transcripts. And what they do is they go, okay, you're meeting our requirements. We're an approved provider through the Department of Education. We're going to endorse you for that credential. So prior to actually officially graduating, you will receive an email from the registrar's office outlining the next steps that you would have to take in order to get that credential. You'll complete that online application through the Department of Education. And then once your degree is confirmed, we will, on behalf of you, send this, we endorse you as a school counselor. And so then you go back, you pay some fees, because who doesn't love paying fees? And then, ta-da, you get the credential. With school folks, there is no paper. So you can't hang it in your office, which is probably the downside of it, right? It's only online that it will show that you have the credential. Years ago, they got rid of it. And so they've just been staying with electronic, but there's no physical certificate, unfortunately, for school folks. Sorry. But you could print out the printout, I guess, if you really want it. But again, for school, this is just the credentialing process. And thankfully, the registrar's office is wonderful, and they really walk you through the steps much better than I can right now. So, and obviously speak to your advisor as well, because they know the process. I don't want to not say that they don't. All right. So now we're going to kind of get into the licensure process, what we all came here for. So whichever license you might be applying for, be it the LAC, the LPC, the LCADC, you will need to submit an application online through the New Jersey Consumer Affairs. They have a specific portal for this. So if you go to, if you just Google NJ Consumer Affairs, there you will find whatever board, there's like a way of apply, and you will apply through the portal. As of March of last year, right, 2022, no longer accepting paper applications. So if you decide to mail that packet in, no one will answer it. It's going into the abyss. So please do not mail anything to the committees. They will not open it, nor will they get it. So within the portal, you will need to create a username and password. And when you do this once, you're done. Like, you don't need to update it every time you apply for a different license, or when you go through licensure renewal. You will have this username and password for the rest of your life. And so these, again, like I said, will never expire. And you will use this username and password every single time. All right. Okay. Unfortunately, I know for you folks here, you can't see it, but what it says is, the first thing is you have 90 days to complete the application. If you do not complete it, it will be considered abandoned and they will delete it. So I know some folks are like, oh, I want to get started, but I'm not graduating for another year. Don't start it. Maybe take the paper application and start the outline, but do not start an online application until you are ready to do that, to completely submit. Or maybe at the end of your program, within the last month or two, you can begin that. But no, again, you have 90 days to complete it and submit it. Okay. They will always say pending until every single document is entered and uploaded and received. So I'm guilty of it. I'll reload and see if I got my license, and I'll just keep saying pending. And it's until the board receives and confirms all of that information will then turn over. So we'll always say pending until everything's completed. Timing. While we would love to submit everything and it's done the next day, the board says it can take up to 3 weeks. I'm gonna go with or more. So unfortunately, I know that they are understaffed and under-resourced, and there are a lot of people applying. So it can take 3 weeks or longer. But know that you also can advocate for yourself and reach out to folks after you submit to kind of follow up. But they do their best in terms of getting you getting your application approved, because they know that, you know, you guys are paying them money and completing this, and that the field needs us, right? So they want to make sure that they're getting you approved. So if you're missing any items, you will be contacted by email. They will send you something like, hey, we got this, but you're missing this, or we got this, you need to redo this. They will contact you. And within the application, be prepared to answer questions related to your moral character, any arrests or convictions. If you have any, they need to know about that. Student loans, I don't know why they ask about those, but they do. If you owe child support, your ability to practice physically and cognitively, and they will also ask about your use of illicit or illegal controlled dangerous substances. You do have the option of pleading the fifth on some of these, specifically with in reference to the substances, but know that they might ask you that. So don't be like completely taken aback by that question. So again, those are just some things to be prepared to answer. Okay. So the other thing to know is that New Jersey law requires anyone who has a license under within the healthcare system, and we're under that umbrella, we have to go through a criminal background check. That is non-negotiable. You can't say, but no, I have nothing. Doesn't matter. You have to do it. And even if you did it 2 years ago, they're going to make you do it again. So once that you get to this step, they will send you a letter or an email with instructions on how to go about getting fingerprinted. That's how they do the background check. And then you would schedule that on your own accord. So for instance, when I went through it, I had to pick, there's a million of these fingerprinting places, which I did not know about, but you get to pick whichever one is most convenient and get a time slot, and then you go and you roll your fingers, and that will be done. Then it can take up to 2 weeks for for the committee to receive the results of your background check. So just something that can add to time. So while it might be 3 weeks that they're reviewing the application, right? Then they say, okay, good, great, here's your next step. That's another 2 weeks. So know that it could take up to 5 or 6 weeks, if all things go according to plan, to actually receive the letters LAC. Okay. All right. So I'm not going to pull up the full application. However, if you Google LAC application or LPC application, there's still the PDF version, which is the portal has the PDF version, but in a digital way. So, you know, click boxes as opposed to written boxes. So this is what maybe it looks like when you go to the Professional Counselor Examiner Committee website. But you will go to the application and form, and you will click the application for licensure, professional counselor, rehabilitation counselor, associate counselor. They all are the same, but you get to click which one you're specifically applying to. The other thing that's great, what they did do as well is, if you can see, they did provide an overview. There is a PDF or a PowerPoint presentation of the overview application that they have also provided, should you need to refer to something as well. But a lot of the information that I'm presenting today comes from that PowerPoint. But again, you will apply for, you'll use that application for licensure. And then you will click initial application. So, right, this is your first time applying, you're not renewing, this is your initial application. So that's really where you want to focus and go. You will then choose. So again, once you get into the portal, you get to choose. And again, for our folks going for their LAC, you are going to choose associate counselor. And then it gives you the license, the profession. I'm sorry, let me take a step back. The Professional Counselor Committee is under the Marriage and Family Therapy Examiner Board. So that's why you go to profession is marriage and family therapy. And then license type is associate counselor. And the obtained by method is online. They only give you one option. And then again, as you can see, they'll kind of walk you through it where next step is you'll be asked this stuff. So again, that's kind of, if your screen doesn't look like this, you went somewhere else. And I don't know where, but make sure it looks something like this. All right. Within the application, there's a click box of, did you take and pass the National Counselor Examiner? I'm saying that right? Okay. Yeah. So the NCE. I know for our program, and especially for our master's students, you're given that option to complete that exam prior to graduating. Please do it. Please, please, please. You don't want to wait 3 years and have to relearn all of this. Don't be like me. Well, we also didn't have this option, but it's a wonderful option that's available for you. So please do this because again, you're already studying for the comps. I'm a big fan of killing 2 birds with 1 stone or double dipping. So not working harder, working smarter, and making sure that give yourself room between the comps and NCE. Like don't take them back to back in terms of like one Saturday is the comps and then the following Saturday is the NCE. Give yourself a break, but like make sure that you're doing it within your time here. For folks that decide, oh, I'll just wait. You can most certainly wait to take the exam after you graduate. However, you will have to apply for approval from the board. So that also delays the potential or obtaining that LAC because the board has to review your application. Then they send you the approval to sit for the exam. Then you have to schedule the exam. Or you have to contact MBCC to then get their approval to then schedule the exam. So that can add more time. Taking it on your own, and I don't know, especially when you register through us, are they allowed to take it wherever they want? Do you know, Dr. Koyman? Oh, okay.
There's sites listed.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So you're given a testing site. You're allowed that option. Either way, if you do it before or after, know that you don't have to come to campus to take it, but that you get to choose your day and time and location. So something that's convenient for you. So again, that's done. If you wait after, you do all of that on your own, and that can delay the process longer. Excuse me. If you complete it prior to graduation, that actually excels the process. So if you take it prior to graduating, when you do apply for licensure, you will then also contact MBCC to have that exam, your score sent to the board, because the board needs to receive that to go, okay, we know you passed, right? So again, something to take into account. If you choose to do it after graduating, MBCC only, or I guess this is just interesting knowledge for everyone, they only send scores once a month. So they're not going, oh, you're requesting, okay, we'll send it. They're going, who's requested in the last 30 days, we'll send the batch. So know that that can also take time as well. Okay, yeah, we have a question already, yeah.
For the scheduling, would you suggest like the same semester as the comps or just before you graduate?
I would say just before you graduate. It's a great question. So should you take the comps and the NCE during the same one? It's your preference, like whatever I definitely wouldn't say like 1 week one and then the following week. I've spoken to students where maybe if they're graduating spring, they might take the comps fall and the NCE spring. So again, it's preference, but it's, what you feel comfortable and capable of.
We do have a few other questions.
Oh, okay.
So it says, if I took the NCE and passed in 2018, would I have to take it again now that I'm in the advanced cert program?
No, you do not have to retake. If you've taken the NCE once and you passed, you do not have to take it again. There is no expiration date on that passing. Also, there is no expiration on your education. In terms of some folks might not apply right after graduation for their LAC. They might wait 5 years. There's no expiration on your education to apply.
Also, are advanced counseling cert students able to take the NCE through Montclair?
No, unfortunately, no advanced counseling cert students are. The NCE option is only for the master's in counseling students. That is something that has been worked out through MBCC as well as KCREP, I believe. And so again, it's only specific for the master's students.
And again, I'm taking the NCE in April and graduating in May 2023. Can I start the application now, or should I wait until I have done the NCE?
I would probably wait till you took the NCE, just because again, there's that 90-day limit and how long they keep that application. Great question.
There's a question about moving to a different state. Do I need to take the NCE again?
That would be a question for that state licensure or committee. And at the end, I'll talk a little bit about reciprocity. I'll just quickly go over that in terms of states. But again, each state is different, and this is very much specific to New Jersey requiring the NCE. Dr. Quinn?
I get it. When should I apply? Can I apply before I finish this? I'm going to graduate in May. I finished the NCE, I passed, but I haven't graduated yet. Can I apply before graduation, or should I apply right after I graduate?
So applying before graduation, and I think that's a great question. You need to send your transcripts. So your transcripts need to reflect 60 credits. If you're applying before you graduate, they're going to go, where's your 60 credits? No. So I would definitely wait. And as well as, because it also says or asks, do you have a master's in counseling? You want to be able to show that degree as well. So I would wait until the degree is conferred so that it shows graduated master's in counseling, 60 credits, or so that you have that, because they're going to say pending, and then they're going to be like, you need to send us updated information. I had to go through that a bunch of times where they're like, you're missing this. Okay. And that was with snail mail. So this might, again, just, I would wait, fill out the application, say April, if you're graduating in May, but wait until you actually get that conferred degree or it shows on your transcripts. Yeah.
So that NCE is state specific.
The NCE is state specific to New Jersey. Yes, correct. Yep. Any other NCE questions in the chat?
There is one more about the CPCE results before taking the NCE. So do I have to wait for my CPCE?
No.
What is CPCE?
That's the comps. You do not have to wait for your comp results in order to sign up and or take the exam or take the NCE. So that's a great question. But no, you do not have to wait for those results. Okay. Any last questions on the NCE? Oh, yeah.
I mean, isn't the content, the material on the NCE and the material on the comps basically the same?
Correct.
So it would be okay to take them both in the same semester, right?
Yes, yes.
You can tolerate them to test.
Correct. I mean, staring at a computer screen with 200 multiple choice questions is pretty draining.
My idea.
Yeah. So the question, if no one else heard that on Zoom, is the NCE being comparable to the comp exam that you need to take at the end of your program. And they are, right? They do are 8 areas of study or 8 areas, our core courses are most of the focus of both exams. The questions might be different, and the passing scores might be different, but again, you could theoretically take it the same semester. Yep. Okay, so here's the fun part that everyone has all the questions about. This is probably the most confusing, but actually the easiest, right? So within the LAC application, you will complete a list of areas of focus. And so I think there's 8, 9. There are 9 areas that the professional counselor committee requires us to place our coursework in. Here's the thing, you have to list 45 credits. That's 15 classes over these 9 domains. If you put 48, they will say, do it again. I've seen it happen. So please make sure it is 45 credits, 15 classes only. Now, where do these classes go? And I put up on the screen, especially the areas of study. When you think about our core courses, a lot of their titles correspond to these areas of focus. So, counseling theories. Anyone want to take a guess here? What might go there? Anyone?
Counseling theory.
Counseling theories, COUN 577 will go in counseling theories and practice, right? So thankfully, I think our faculty and department were wonderful in creating the titles of these courses to make it easier to implement and put into these areas of focus. You will also use some of your electives to be placed in here. So we'll have 8 classes from the core, and you will then add in the additional 7 classes. So for some of my clinical mental health and addiction folks, COU and 604, clinical assessment and diagnosis. Anyone have a clue where that might fall under this?
Assessment of individual.
Close. Try another one up. 2 up, maybe under the helping relationship.
I'm
So-
looking at the list on the right.
Oh, sorry, that makes good sense. It would actually go, so if, for example, clinical assessments and diagnosis would go under the human growth, development, and maladaptive behaviors. Right? So that's another one. So, yes,
Can you talk about including or not including your?
yes, I'm gonna, don't you worry, I'm gonna talk about that. So here's the thing, a lot of people might go, well, I don't know where this class goes, and all of your programs or study are different. So I can only speak to, again, the 8 core that really go and place themselves. When you look at your electives, or maybe some of those core courses for your concentration, if you're confused, read the course description. The answer is within there, right? And some might fit into 2 of those areas. Make the most educated decision on where you're going to place them, right? So again, they're not going to be like, oh my God, you put, advanced ethics in the counseling profession. That doesn't go, right? They want you to understand kind of what areas you're working in, and also just list the 45 credits. Here's the thing. For folks that are like, oh, well, can I put internship or practicum? Do not do that. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Please do not put your internship or practicum within these areas of focus, because if you do, then you cannot count those internship hours towards the 4,500 required hours. So I hope that made sense. And I will repeat that just in case. Do not put your internship or practicum within the areas of study here. You want to be able to use your internship and practicum, those hours that you have accrued, you want to be able to use those hours towards the 4,500, so that you're graduating and needing less than 4,500 hours. Use your hours that you've earned towards the 4,500, okay? Because if you do, they will not accept those hours. All right. As you can see, like I said, please do not include more than the 45 credits. They will send it back to you. All right, so yes, Dr. Quayman.
Make sure every box at least has one.
Yes, correct. Good point. Thank you. Dr. Quayman reminded me, make sure every domain or area of study has at least one course in it. So don't leave one of those boxes blank. Some might have 3, that's cool. You might have 2 that have 3. You might have a couple that have 2. You might have 1 that has just 1. Just make sure 1 is the minimum and no more than 3. Okay?
I have a few questions.
Yeah, great. I know
Okay.
this is the one that always gets the most questions.
So, are you saying that the classes all have to be from the core courses, or can you include an elective like LGBTQ counseling, play therapy, things like that?
So again, I highlight the core courses. So the question was, if all of the core courses have to be listed, those are 8 given courses for the 15. So the additional 7 that you need can be from the electives. I think it's wise to use those 8 classes, because otherwise you're scrambling and going, where am I putting this? Or I'm not meeting the 15. Definitely use the 8 in each of these areas and then add in those electives to add the additional 1 or 2 within that area. Okay. Any other ones on this?
That's everything.
Okay, cool.
One
Yes.
thing I've thought of, and with electives, try to use more clinical courses.
Correct.
As opposed to a school counseling course. So
Yes.
Counseling in schools too would go on this.
Yes, that's a good point. Thank you, Dr. Koyman. Dr. Koyman also made it just to note, use more of those clinical courses. School counseling 1 and school counseling 2 would not be applicable in these areas of focus. So again, for maybe our school folks that are going for the advanced cert, you're probably not going to include your school counseling courses, but more of those counseling children and adolescents, or the intro to substance use class, or another clinical elective. So making sure to highlight the core classes, but also clinical classes as well. Good point. Thank you. No more questions on that? Okay. All right. So the other thing, you got your education, you took the exam, you filled out that crazy grid. You also need to do supervised hours. So the state, the Professional Counselor Committee requires that anyone who is seeking licensure as a licensed professional counselor must complete 4,500 clinical supervised hours. That is 3 years of full-time work. There was some talk about them lowering that. I can tell you that back in January, the Professional Counselor Committee voted unanimously to shoot that down, and that is not changing. It's in their minutes. So if you want to look, you could check out their minutes from their meeting in January, but it is continuing to stay at 4,500 hours. Again, like I mentioned, with the putting internship hours, you can count your internship hours towards those 4,500. Okay. So you did all of this, you graduated, now you're seeking the supervision to complete maybe the 3,800 hours, right? You need to find an approved clinical supervisor. Your supervisor would be someone who has their LPC and also the credential of an approved clinical supervisor, so an ACS. That has to be issued by MBCC. Someone else might be an LPC who has completed 3 graduate credits in supervision. They would have documentation of that. Another one might be someone who has their PhD in counselor education. So maybe some of our doc folks.
My supervisor has a computer.
I know, I'm gonna get to that one. Yep.
Oh, I'm not.
And you can definitely also seek a licensed clinical social worker who has completed a national, the National Association of Social Work Clinical Supervision course. Whew, that's a mouthful.
There was actually I mean,
No,
they're like, they don't have a certification like they see.
no. They have something that's called a SIFI, like an SIFI, but that's for site for internships, not for license. So you can seek someone if you're like, oh, this person has their LCSW and they say that they're an approved a clinical supervisor. There's folks that are LCSWs who also have their ACS. I've seen it. So you can look for that. But again,
So that would count or that would?
that would count. Yeah, if they have the ACS. Also, just because I learned this recently, because I ran into it, the person who has the ACS should have a minimum of 2 years post LPC experience for the board to approve them. I got shot down. So again, here's some options, but again, if you have questions about this and someone who is saying, oh, I can, ask them, like, have you been approved? Like, have you gone through this application process? That's another way to field and inquire about if they are approved. They would know the application process. So again, those are some of those qualified supervisors.
There's a question about, would school counselors practicum internship count as well?
Towards the 4,500.
Yeah.
So, your internship hours count. It can be in whatever setting. However, your clinical supervised hours after graduation have to be in a clinical mental health or substance use setting. So you cannot obtain your LPC working and counting school counseling. The board will say no. Part of submitting and with supervision is you have to have your plan of supervision approved before your hours can start accruing. So say you graduate, you got a job, you have your LAC, you got a job, you submitted the application. Not until you have that letter stating you are approved can you start counting. So even if you've worked 6 weeks, unfortunately, those 6 weeks don't count towards those 4,500. Yes, Susan.
But what about the hours that you're doing in internship and?
Those count, but I'm just saying, once you graduate, you have your LAC, you obtained employment, you submitted the supervision approval. Not until the board says, yes, we accept this, can you start counting hour one. Does that I hope that makes sense. Like I said, you can't accrue hours, and a lot of places might not allow you to practice counseling until that supervision plan is approved. And that's actually a regulation through the board. Yes.
So is this after the LAC that you do, so you do the LAC and then you do the supervision?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So it's
separate.
the LAC, you have to obtain your LAC first before you can start accruing or even putting in an application for a plan of supervision. Stephanie?
Yeah, so I have two questions.
Yep.
So one question is, can you work towards your LPC, the 4,500 hours part-time, or does it have to be full-time?
Yep. So the question was if you have to work full-time or part-time towards your total hours of the 4,500. It can be part-time, very much so. You don't have, I'm just saying, typically people who are doing this might be like, what's the full-time amount? I equate it to 3 years. That's what they accept, only 1,500 hours per year. They break that down as 30 hours per week that you are counting. But you most certainly can take and do this part-time. You have 6 years from the issuance and the approval of that plan of supervision to complete the 4,500 hours.
That answers one of the other questions, but the next question is, the board gives you 1,000 hours to K-Prep grads, right? So does that mean that we only need an additional 3,500, but still over a 3-year period?
So just because you graduate, you're not just given or awarded 1,000 hours. So you actually have to contact Professor Mangano, who is our clinical coordinator. And what she does is she will draft up a letter verifying your hours. So most of the time, right, our practicum is 100 hours and our internships are 300 hours. So you're probably walking away with about 700 hours, maybe a little more. She will only verify that. Those are the only ones that can get verified. You cannot add an additional 300 just because you graduated from a K-Prep program. I wish that would have saved me a lot of time. However, you would then deduct that 700 hours, give or take, from the 4,500. So I can't do quick math. So whatever that answer is, it's that amount left. And you, again, you would still have 6 years, up to 6 years to complete the remainder of those.
But I
Susan?
read somewhere that they sort of they round you up to 1,700 if you're in a K-Prep. No?
We're only verifying, they're not going to hand you 300 additional hours. If you find it, please let me know. But the New Jersey Professional Counselor Committee is only accepting your verified hours.
And are there ways to extend your permit or your LAC if you don't complete it within 6 years?
So can you extend your LAC? So here's the thing, the LAC, once you apply and once you're awarded your LAC, you can determine if you want to go on for your LPC. That's when you're given the 6-year time limit to complete the supervised hours. If you're like, I'm cool with my LAC, that's cool. Just continue with the continuing education and renewing your license. No one's forcing you to get the LPC. You are most certainly allowed to make that choice. Most people choose to go for their LPC, but say you get your LAC, you're totally okay having that, and working under supervision or at an agency and working in that capacity, you can keep that for as long as you want and say, 5 years down the line, you're like, you know what, I do want to pursue licensure. Then you will have to submit that plan of supervision, and then your 6-year clock starts. Okay, I hope that made sense. Okay. And then just something else to be aware of is at the end of supervision, or so if you terminate supervision or if your supervisor changes, the supervisor must submit documentation of that to the committee, because again, they're saying that you're working under their license, and if you're no longer being under their supervision and something happens, they're going to contact them and be like, what's up? And if they didn't submit this, then they're going to be held liable. So again, just making sure that your supervisor is making that aware to the committee. Okay. So this is just basic LAC. So the LPC requirements. So the LPC, you have 2 options of how you're gonna complete it. Option A, which is the 4,500 supervised clinical hours, like I said, or there is an option B, and option B is 3,000 supervised clinical hours, which is 2 years, but you would need to complete an additional 30 credits of graduate level courses. So that's another 2 years of grad work. That might be someone like our PhD or doc folks, they can bump up the time or bump down the time needed because they're getting their doctorate. And so those additional 30 credits that they might be taking as part of their doc program can be applied to decrease their supervised hours. Again, it's your initial 60 credits plus an additional 30. So it's not, oh, I'm just taking 30, no, 60 plus, so you're taking 90 credits total. Again, maybe a shameless plug. Some people might do that in a way of adding in all of our CERT programs if you want. I mean, it would be a lot, but you could do it. I don't recommend it, but I mean, I'm not going to not share about the CERT program. All right. So again, you have those 2 options. Most people go for the 4,500 because it just works. So once you complete those 4,500 supervised hours, then you're able to apply for your LPC. So you can't do that before your 4,500 hours are up. Again, you're gonna go back into the portal in Consumer Affairs, and you're gonna upload licensure documentations, and you're going to go back to the initial application and apply for the professional counselor, right? So the initial one was associate, then you'll go to the professional one. You will upload all of those documents. There is supervision forms and evaluations that need to be completed that your supervisor will submit, verifying that you've completed the hours, as well as endorsing you for the credential. You do not have to resubmit your NCE scores. You will not have to redo that area of study domain, so we get to save that. But again, some of those basic questions of illicit substances, moral character, etc. And so it's a shorter application, which is wonderful. And you might have to go through a background check again, even though you did that 2 years ago. But you will have to do that. And then just making sure that all necessary fees are paid and all necessary documentation is uploaded. And again, that necessary documentation is really coming from your supervisor. If you've had to go through multiple supervisors, then you need to make sure that they're submitting those documentations and those are getting uploaded to your application. Okay. And so once you do that, you get a therapist or you become one, right? So everybody becomes a therapist. So it is confusing, but it can, you will get to the end of it. And then you get to celebrate like we got a car from Oprah, because wouldn't that be wonderful? I do want to quickly also, I know primarily a lot of our folks are looking at their LPC, but I do also just want to quickly cover the licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor credential for our addiction folks and or people that might want to explore adding that into their scope of practice or switching concentrations, but that's, you know, my personal bias. So it's similar, except there's a few different areas. So with the LCADC, you actually have to submit a plan of supervision right away, even when you're interning. And you're going to apply for the alcohol and drug counselor credential through the alcohol and drug counselor committee. So again, similar portal. If you've already created one for your LAC or vice versa for the LCADC, use that username and password is universal for both applications. You will submit the plan of supervision before, and that needs to get approved. If you're already working at an agency that is substance use specific, your direct supervisor is going to be like, we need to submit this right away because it's part of the regulations of the Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services. If you're working in a substance use agency, you have to be working towards this specific credential. Again, you're really putting, so with the LAC and working towards the LPC, you get the LAC first, then you put in the supervision. For the LCADC, you're putting the supervision in first before you submit any type of application. So there's no like provisional license for the LCADC. Again, there's within the application, you'll see that you'll apply for the proposed plan of supervision first. That just opens a file on you through the state. So who can supervise for CADCs or LCADCs? Someone who has their licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor, who also is a CCS or a certified clinical supervisor, or someone who's dually licensed, so an LPC or an LCSW, who has their clinical supervision credential and also has LCADC. So it's very specific. They have to have an LCADC with that additional credential afterwards in order to be an approved supervisor. The other thing that they require within this plan of supervision is resumes, your agreement, job description, I got muted. Okay, sorry. No, that's all right. So I was just saying, just when you're submitting this application, be sure to include all of these. And it's similar to with the LAC plan of supervision, but this also has specific requirements of the brochure and the client disclosure form. If you forget it, they will send you a letter. I had that happen to me. I forgot a couple of these things and they're like, we're not approving this until you send us this. And I said, okay. So that added another 6 weeks to my application. Anyway, so again, making sure to follow directions, which I guess I'm not good at, and making sure to include everything that is being asked of you. But again, for the LCADC, you're putting in the plan first and then applying later. Okay. Again, it's going to be under, when you're applying for the LCADC, it's again going to be under the marriage and family therapy examiners, and you're applying for the LCADC. Here's the thing, you do your supervision first, then you apply for the LCADC. So there's no application, you're not getting a provisional license or credential in substance use. You have to complete the education in hours before you complete the application. I hope that makes sense. Okay. And again, you have 90 days to do this. They also have something similar. Woohoo! So if you're doing if you've done this grid for the LAC, it's similar with the LCADC. The only additional thing that they added is a pharmacology and physiology, and that would be our Health 511 class would go in there, right? And so you only really need to include, from my understanding, or at least how I submitted it, was including one class in each area. They don't specify the amount of credits. I've looked at this application 1,000 times and they do not specify it for the LCADC. So again, it's taking, from your LAC application and just copying and pasting. All right, with the LCADC, so my addiction concentration folks, your program, so your master's in addiction counseling, allows you to work towards both licensures. Embedded within the addiction classes is this 270 core training hours that is also completed within the CADC program. So we have been historically an approved educational provider. We are approved through the Addiction Professional Certification Board of New Jersey, and saying that we meet the state requirements and standards. So again, for the addiction folks, we're meeting both not just the LPC standards, but also the LCADC standards. So again, my personal bias of the addiction track, and maybe I'm shamefully plugging it, you can walk away with the education for 2 licensures. Just saying, okay. And so you could do that, right? And so you have that ability. So the other thing that you will do, the board will say, okay, we need verification that you completed these 270 hours. We can supply that letter. So you will email currently Dr. Schertz, if you're in the master's program, and ask for that letter verifying the 270 educational hours. Okay, because in the application, there's all of these domains and they make no sense. We do all of that hard work for you. You don't have to fill this out within the LCADC application. So that letter verifies this and lets you skip all of these pages, right? Which is wonderful because I don't even understand it and I made a matrix. So we do that for you in a simple letter. So-and-so has completed. We are an approved provider. Met the 270 educational hours. Save yourself a headache and time. So like I said again, we are an approved provider. We complete the 270 educational hours that are required through the New Jersey State Board. Again, you can handwrite them within those domains. You have a few options. You can request a letter from Montclair to verify them. Or if you feel like it, you can send your transcript to the Addiction Professional Certification Board of New Jersey. AKA Rich Bow, and he can send you back a nice little form that looks like that, that's on the screen, showcasing that you've met the hours and where, and the board accepts that as well. There is a fee sending it to the CERT board, so just an FYI, we do not charge a fee. So, it's something to take into account. And again, you're not going to request this until you're submitting your application to the board. So until you're filling out the LCADC or planning to start the LCADC application, do not request this verification until you're ready to do that, okay? The other component with the LCADC application is, like I mentioned, there is supervised hours. There's the LCADC requires 3,000, so that's 2 years. So not as much as the LPC, but still a ton. And out of those 3,000, 300 of those should be in the 12 core functions of a substance use counselor. And working in the field, you're doing these 12 core functions pretty much on a daily basis. And then the other thing with the LCADC is the requirement of attending 30 self-help meetings. So if you're in our addiction track and maybe took a few classes and there's a 10, 12 step meeting reaction paper, guess what? You get to count those meetings towards those 30. So see, we're doing you all a solid. Of those 35 need to be in Alcoholics Anonymous, 5 in Narcotics Anonymous, 5 in Al-Anon, and then the additional 15 can be a mixture of different self-help groups, whatever they might be, GA, CODA, family recovery, etc. So again, most of our classes, our substance use classes, might have that component. So by the end of your program, you're probably already like 6 to 8 meetings done. So again, you can use those. Okay, yeah.
I have a question about the previous slide.
Yep.
So
Got a question.
for the Schedule A's, when we're filling in our like weekly logs in our practicum and internship,
Mhm.
should we be indicating like spent 15 minutes doing intake, or, like how are we gonna go back and tally up all of those?
So here's the thing. Okay, so are you going to document the 12 core functions within your internship or practicum?
Yeah.
No, you're not going to put these little things. Like overall, I know I've worked and did screenings for many of clients. So
Yeah.
over the course of a year, I've definitely completed 15. So April 2024, I completed the 15.
So I don't have to. go
Yeah,
back
it's
and
not
get
like
those documents.
meticulous. And then, so you're just saying, I completed it by this day. Like, I know for me, when filling this out, one of the areas that I didn't fulfill right away was the family counseling. So I worked with my supervisor to schedule myself overseeing our family education program. So that was something that I specifically was like, okay, I need 15 hours in this specifically. Let me focus on that for the next month or two. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then your supervisor will just sign off on this, and they'll sign off on your meeting attendance. And again, that you completed the 3,000 hours. All right. So with the LCADC, after you complete the hours, I can't really see what I wrote there, but after you complete the hours and submit the application, you will then need to take 2 exams. The written exam and the oral exam. The written is a computerized exam, and the oral is you get to talk into a little tape recorder. Those are done through the Addiction Professional Certification Board of New Jersey. Typically, if you take these exams, you're going to take the written exam first, and then you will schedule to take the oral exam. Once you pass all of this, then you get your LCADC. However, don't be like me. Don't do everything backwards. Save yourself $500. A lot of stress, crying, hiding, all this stuff. If you obtain your LPC first, you do not have to take these exams. So you get a bailout. I unfortunately did it backwards. So I had to go through this process, which was great and a nice learning experience, but my wisdom passed on to you. And again, when I graduated, my program was only 48 credits. So it made sense for me to do the LCADC first and then the LPC. But because especially our addiction counseling program has the 60 credits, is dual licensure capable, you can work towards your LPC and obtain that and then get your LCADC. Now, I don't know. Oh, and then you get to be a counselor or a substance use counselor. I want to just highlight something because I know this is a question that has come up repeatedly. Can you work on your LCADC and LPC hours concurrently? Yes. You have to have the correct supervisor for each. However, my words of advice are make sure you're doing good documentation of if you're working with substance use specific, co-occurring mental health, where you're spending your time. So making sure that you're also documenting your hours accordingly, maybe not as detailed as in our internships, but just being mindful of that. But also don't apply for them both at the same time. So you want to spend your time and apply for the LPC, obtain that first, continue your LCADC supervision, another month or two typically, and then apply for the LCADC, right? So don't give it away. But just make sure that you hold the LPC first and then go for your LCADC. It's not this additional long drawn out thing. But again, it's important to make sure that you have the correct supervision for both licensures. So if you're saying, oh, well, I have an LPC license or a supervisor and they're going to supervise for both. No, they can't. They can only supervise for your LPC hours. If they are an LPC with an LCADC and an ACS, they can certainly supervise for both. But again, making sure that you're having the correct supervisor for the license. Okay.
So
yeah.
just to clarify, because
Yes.
that was my question.
Yep.
So they don't have to have the CCS, they have the ACS,
If
and the LPC and,
yes.
and LCSW.
Correct.
I mean, the LCADC and LCSW or LCADC.
With their
Either one of the council, with either one of the supervisors.
correct with their so again, with this LCADC, it doesn't just have to be the CCS. It can be someone who has dual licensure with that end licensure, clinical supervisor credential. The other, and maybe I will also point this caveat, is that they need to have their LCADC for at least a minimum of 1 year. Okay. Any questions regarding the LCADC process? Okay. Again, personal bias, if you're thinking and wanting to get dually licensed, I say go for it. It broadens your scope of practice and it adds additional letters behind your name. So, all right, so just some things about continuing education. So like I mentioned, just because you graduate and you obtain your license does not mean that you're done learning. We're always learning. We want to make sure that we're providing evidence-based care and being up to date with the care that we're providing our clients. So our licenses require that we complete continuing education every 2 years during the renewal process. Typically, the renewal process falls on even years. So more recently, I went through the renewal process in 2022. I will have to go through the renewal process again in 2024. So every 2 years. Again, renew by November is for LACs, LPCs, LCADCs are by July 31st. So some questions that pop up, and I definitely have asked this to the board. What if I'm issued my license on an odd year? Do I have to complete the education? Yes. However, it's not 40. They go, we'll give you a grace period of 20. So say you get licensed in your LAC in 2023, you will have 1 year. So with the renewal of 2024, you will have to complete 20 CEUs. What if I'm issued my license during the same year as a renewal year? So if you graduate 2024, in May, and you have to renew in November, say, no, you don't have to complete any continuing education. They are kind. They did give us a grace period for that. But what if I complete more than the 40 required CEUs? You get to carry over 10 of those hours to the next renewal period. So that sometimes we do extra unintentionally or through just credentialing or trainings that we go to. So know that you can carry over 10 of those to the next renewal. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So I just want to highlight the continuing education requirements for each. Again, and I put the CADC up here just so because they're a little different in terms of they need 60. If you just have your CADC, I know that doesn't really count for our master's folks, but for our LPC, our LAC, and LCADCs, it's 40. So 40 CEUs every 2 years. I know this is probably not the best to see on the screen. The LCADC, or any substance use, requires 20 of those to be in person. Given COVID, they're requiring it be synchronistic. So it can be virtual, but you need to be able, it has to be live. Like the presenter has to be on the same time talking to you. And you have to keep your camera on because they won't verify your attendance if you don't. They also require specific CEs in specific areas of focus. So for my LPC and LCADCs, out of the 40, 5 of those have to be in ethics. They have to be ethics specific. Again, within the LPC and LCADCs, 3 of them need to be in social and cultural. So cultural competencies, multicultural, cultural humility, and social justice. And then more recently, within the most newest renewal, you have to also obtain 1 CE in opiate education. Yeah, so that's a newer requirement. Again, given the opiate epidemic, being aware of it, and that's very much a requirement for our counselors. For the LCADC, similarly, 3 hours in social and cultural competencies, social justice, etc. of the 40, 3 CEUs in legal standards. That has been passed in this last renewal. So you need to make sure that and it's legal standards because there's specific confidentiality laws related to substance use counseling. So they are making it a point to make sure that our substance use counselors are constantly aware of those legal standards. The thing to note for my LCADC folks is during your first renewal, you actually need to complete 6 legal standard hours. That's only once during your first renewal, and then after that, it's only 3. Okay, I hope that made sense. And it's within the reg. So if you have any questions about continuing education, you can go to the Professional Counselor Committee website or the Alcohol and Drug Counselor Committee website, type it, do the Control F, put in CEUs or continuing education, and they specify this. So you can still, like, if you're ever confused on what you need, you can always refer back to those standards and regulations. So it's public knowledge. Okay. All right, so here's just a list, and this is just for your references. These are approved providers for continuing education. So if you're going to a conference that is sponsored by the National Association of Social Work, and that won't count for the LPC board. They will be like, this is not an approved provider, we didn't. So you want to make sure that it has maybe the MBCC credential on it, the National Board for Certified Counselors, I think that's the correct one, emblem, right? So you want to make sure it has that. If you're ever confused, ask them, is this approved for counselors? And the same with the LCADC. This is one list is for the LPC and one's for the LCADC. My suggestion, if you're duly licensed, go to the ones that I have marked, double dip, because if they are approved, again, here's my, I love double dipping. If they are approved for both MBCC and NADAC, or through, and NADAC is the National Addiction Professional Association, if this training has that approval for both, it counts for both licenses. So you're not doing 80, you're only doing 40, right? You don't have to go above and beyond for that. So again, if you decide to go dual licensure, keeping that in mind. Okay. And again, this is some trainings and specific modalities might be not on this list, and you can always ask them, are you guys approved by this agency or this credential? And where can you find CEs outside of those? Ask your employers. Sometimes they might have in-house trainings that they might give that to you. They might even have a system that they provide to you guys where you get free CEs that are asynchronistic. I know one of my old employers used a system called Relias. So I was able to obtain CEs through that, right? And I can select the ones that met MBCC and NADAC, and I can specify social ethics, right? So like I can very much hone in on what I need, and it was free. Who doesn't love free CEs? Looking at, if you're a member of ACA, you get a free CE of the month if you're a member, taking advantage of that. Same with the New Jersey Counseling Association. They offer free, I know they're starting free CEs monthly coming up. So you can reach out to them or join them. Same with NADAC. Same with the New Jersey Addiction Professional Association. And these are some things. I list PESI. Historically, they have been, however, more recently, their approved provider status for MBCC has been removed. They are no longer an approved MBCC provider. So PESI does offer a ton of great trainings, and they have a lot of knowledge and skills and stuff, but just know that their MBCC got denied. Oh, okay. All right. And I'm almost done, I promise. And then to be determined or announced, keep out an eye out for us offering CEs. What?
No.
Yeah, so we're hopefully developing and offering more continuing education opportunities for alum and you guys for when you have licensure, so that you guys can always come back and visit us and get CEs. How wonderful is that? So just keep an eye out for that. There is a checklist, and I know I didn't get the paperwork from Mary, but we can send it out to you guys. I created a checklist similar like this, like for your LAC application, for your LCADC application, et cetera, and just making sure that you're going through, did I do this? Do I have this? And just kind of following that checklist to make sure you have all of your ducks in a row. Again, same with the LCADC. So we'll send that out to you guys. And then just some miscellaneous comments. You must keep your profile and records up to date within the state. So if you have any address change or a name change or your supervisor changes, you need to notify the board right away. And again, as a reminder, I know I stated this in the beginning, the application is completely online. Do not send paper. Use the paper as a reference. I think it's wonderful to have that. And just to kind of draft things, write things, scratch out, pad, etc. But again, submit your application through the portal. You will have to have your official transcript. So not just like, hey, I'm going to print from Ness. It has to come from Montclair. Those transcripts need to get sent to the state. And then it is really important, because you are going to be practicing clinicians, to familiarize yourself with state regulations and laws. look at the committee's websites, get used to what numbers and letters that they put out there are. If you have questions, it's all there in regulation and statute. So just because this is counseling 101, it doesn't matter if we claim I didn't know, you were awarded that license, that credential. It's at your responsibility to be aware of the laws and statutes. So, because that's ultimately what you're saying is I'm aware of that. Just some pro tips. Keep a copy of everything. So if you can, like if the application allows you to save it as a PDF, save it. Take a screenshot of what you're doing. I still have my paper. I still have a copy of my paper application. When I had to send it in, I made a copy, so I had it. I still have it. If you have, NCE might send you your scores, keep a copy of that. Keep a copy of all your job descriptions, updated resumes, any kind of receipt that you might receive from the board that you paid things. Because if anything, then they're like, oh, you didn't pay. And it's like, no, I have my PDF documentation that I did pay this fee, right? And keep a log of your hours. I know it can be sometimes, especially within internships, so detailed. It doesn't have to be that way, but just keep a running tally of where you're spending your hours. Individual, group, case management. Doesn't have to be with who specifically, right? But it could document, especially if you're going for 2 licenses, a substance use or a COD client. Again, with the areas of focus, if you're unsure where to place them, return back to your course syllabus and course descriptions. Like I mentioned 3 times, I think already, do not place your practicum or internship hours in those areas of focus, because then you can't count those areas. You want to be able to make sure that you can count those areas or those hours towards your 4,500. And like I mentioned before, if you're looking to become dually licensed, please complete and obtain your LPC first, and then go on to get your LCADC. And the biggest pro tip is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. Though the board is there to help you, the committee is there to help you. If you're confused or feel that they're not, you have that ability to advocate. I will also say, if you are interested on those websites, all of the board meetings or committee meetings are virtual. Go to them, see what's happening, see what they're talking about, ask questions, and learn from them and put your face out there. It can be helpful for you to be there. Okay. And then there's some email addresses that I included in terms of licensure application. So directly who to reach out to, where things need to go. And then, okay, that's the end of my presentation. Whew, I made it through. Woo! Okay. I know.
They were fielding some questions.
Oh, okay.
In the.
So I'll stop sharing.
Okay, you can stop sharing.
How do I? No. Oh, there, right there.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna actually stop recording too.
Sure.
Just because my laptop's about to die.
Oh.
So with that being said, we're gonna just switch
Okay. Switch
laptop.
computers,
Yeah, yeah.
laptops. Got
You
it.
ready, Jonna?
Yeah, I think.
Okay. We're here. You're
Well,
just right here.
And thankfully, you don't need to put anything up on the screen.
Yeah, no, that's what I
Okay.
mean. Okay, here. Okay, that goes with this one. Sorry, everybody, just pivot with us real quick. Oh, it still says report.
So they're working on that. I just. So as we begin to wrap up, just want to give you a big thanks.
Wait.
I would not have done this without you.
Literally,
Yeah.
truly.